The morning fog clung to the cracked sidewalks of Eastwood Heights like a shroud over forgotten dreams. Marcus Washington stepped out of his black Tesla Model S, the soft hum of the electric motor fading into the familiar symphony of his childhood neighborhood. Sirens wailed in the distance, a dog barked behind a chain-link fence, and somewhere a radio played old-school hip-hop through static. The contrast was jarring. Here he stood, wearing a tailored charcoal suit that cost more than most residents here made in a month. His Italian leather shoes touching the same pavement where he once walked barefoot because his sneakers had holes. If you've ever returned to a place that shaped you, only to find yourself completely transformed while it remained frozen in struggle, hit that subscribe button, because this story will challenge everything you think you know about success, loyalty, and what it truly means to come home. Marcus pulled his phone from his jacket pocket and checked the time. 9:30 a.m. The meeting with the community leaders was scheduled for 10 days, but he wanted to walk these streets first to remember. 23 years had passed since he left Eastwood Heights, with nothing but a scholarship to Stanford and a promise to his dying mother that he would never forget where he came from. Now, at 41, he was worth $800 million, his tech company having revolutionized data security for Fortune 500 companies. But standing here, breathing in the scent of fried chicken from Miss Ruby's corner store, mixed with the acrid smell of car exhaust and something else he couldn't quite place, he felt like that scared 18-year-old kid again. The neighborhood hadn't just stayed the same. It had gotten worse. Boarded-up windows stared back at him like dead eyes. Graffiti-covered walls that once displayed vibrant murals painted by local artists. The corner where he used to play basketball with his friends now hosted a different kind of game, one where young men in oversized hoodies exchanged small packages for crumpled bills. Marcus's jaw tightened. This wasn't the Eastwood Heights he remembered, where Mrs. Johnson swept her front steps every morning, and Mr. Peterson fixed bicycles for free in his garage. This was a place that had been systematically abandoned, left to rot while the city invested in developments across town. Marcus? Marcus Washington! The voice came from behind him, gravelly and familiar. He turned to see a man approaching, mid-50s, wearing a faded blue work shirt and jeans. It took Marcus a moment to recognize him. Tommy Rodriguez, his best friend from high school, now walking with a slight limp and carrying the weight of hard years in his shoulders. Tommy. Marcus extended his hand, but Tommy pulled him into a bear hug instead. Man, look at you, look at you. Tommy stepped back, shaking his head with a mixture of pride and something else Marcus couldn't read. We heard you were coming back. The whole neighborhood's been talking about nothing else for weeks. Good things, I hope. Tommy's smile faltered slightly. Mixed feelings, you know. Some folks are excited, others... He shrugged. Others think you forgot about us a long time ago. They walked together down Maple Street, past the house where Marcus had grown up. The small two-bedroom structure looked even smaller now, its yellow paint peeling like old skin. The front porch where his mother used to sit and wave at neighbors sagged under the weight of neglect. A for sale sign hung crooked in the overgrown yard. Your mum's place has been empty for 2 years, Tommy said, following his gaze. The bank took it after Mrs. Chen couldn't keep up with the payments. She was renting it after... He didn't finish the sentence. They both knew. After Marcus's mother died of cancer because she couldn't afford the treatment that might have saved her. I know, Marcus said quietly. I tried to help Mrs. Chen, sent money through a lawyer, but she was too proud to accept it. Said it felt like charity. Pride's about all we got left around here sometimes. They continued walking, past the elementary school where Marcus had first discovered his love for computers in the ancient lab with its 3 functioning machines. The building was condemned now, yellow tape fluttering in the morning breeze like prayer flags for lost hope. Children from the neighborhood now had to take 2 buses to reach the nearest functioning school, a journey that took over an hour each way. So what's this meeting about? Tommy asked. Word is you bought up half the block. Marcus stopped walking. This was it. The moment he'd been preparing for, the conversation he'd rehearsed 100 times in his mind. I bought the whole neighborhood, Tommy. Every property, every building, every vacant lot took me 3 years working through shell companies and intermediaries, but as of yesterday, I own all of Eastwood Heights. Tommy stared at him, his mouth slightly open. You bought the whole neighborhood, 47 properties, the corner store, the old community center, the school building, even the abandoned factory on the east side. Jesus, Marcus, that must have cost $52 million. Tommy whistled low. $52 million. And you're gonna do what? Tear it all down. Build some fancy condos for rich folks. Price out everyone who's left. The pain in Tommy's voice cut through Marcus like a blade. This was what he'd feared, what kept him awake at night for months as he planned this moment. Is that what people think I'm doing? What else would you be doing? It's what always happens. Some developer comes in, talks about urban renewal and revitalization, and next thing you know, families that have been here for generations can't afford to stay. Marcus reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a thick manila envelope. Tommy, I need you to trust me, and I need you to help me explain something to everyone at this meeting. The Eastwood Heights Community Center had seen better days, but it was still standing, still serving as the heart of what remained of the neighborhood's social fabric. By 10 a.m., about 30 people had gathered in the main room, sitting on folding chairs arranged in a rough circle. Marcus recognized some faces, aged and weathered by time and circumstance. Others were new to him, younger residents who had moved in as rents dropped and options elsewhere disappeared. Mrs. Dorothy Williams, now in her 70s and still the unofficial mayor of Eastwood Heights, called the meeting to order. She had been Marcus's mother's best friend, the woman who had driven them to the hospital countless times during those final months, who had held Marcus as he cried at the funeral. "We all know why we're here," Mrs. Williams said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had survived urban renewal projects, economic downturns, and decades of municipal neglect. Marcus Washington has bought our neighborhood. Now, Marcus, we appreciate you coming to talk to us directly, instead of sending lawyers and representatives like most folks would do. But we need to know what your intentions are. Marcus stood up, feeling the weight of every gaze in the room. Some faces showed curiosity, others suspicion. A few displayed outright hostility. In the back row, he spotted Jamal Peterson, Mr. Peterson's grandson, now about 25, and wearing the hard expression of someone who had seen too many promises broken. "First," Marcus began, "I want to acknowledge something. I left this neighborhood 23 years ago, and I know some of you feel like I abandoned it. Like I got mine and forgot about everyone else. Didn't you?" The voice came from Jamal. "You got rich and famous, and we never saw you again until now, when you show up to buy us out." Marcus nodded. "You're right to feel that way. And you're right that I stayed away too long. But I want to tell you why I stayed away and why I'm here now." He opened the manila envelope and pulled out a photograph, old and creased from handling. It showed a young woman in a hospital bed, thin and frail, but smiling as she held the hand of a teenage boy in a cap and gown. "This is my mother 3 days before she died, 3 days after I graduated high school. She made me promise her something that day, and it's a promise that's haunted me ever since." The room had gone completely quiet. Even the children who had been fidgeting in their seats seemed to sense the gravity of the moment. "She made me promise that I would never come back to Eastwood Heights until I was strong enough to fix it. Not just help it, not just throw money at it, but actually fix the systems that broke it in the first place." Mrs. Williams leaned forward. "What do you mean, fix it?" Marcus reached into the envelope again and pulled out a thick stack of documents. Turn Eastwood Heights into a model for what urban communities can be when they're designed by and for the people who live in them. I mean creating a place where families don't have to choose between staying in their community and accessing good schools, quality health care, and economic opportunities. He handed the documents to Mrs. Williams. These are the architectural plans, the business proposals, and the legal framework for what I'm calling the Eastwood Heights Community Trust. Every resident who lives here now will receive a deed to their property, free and clear. No rent, no mortgage, just ownership. The community will collectively own the commercial spaces and decide what businesses we want here. The murmur that went through the room was like electricity. People leaned forward, whispered to each other. Some shook their heads in disbelief. "You're giving us the houses?" asked Maria Santos, a single mother of 3 who worked 2 jobs to afford her tiny apartment. "Yeah, I'm giving you more than that," Marcus said. "I'm giving you control. The community trust will be governed by residents, not by me. You'll decide how to develop the empty lots, what kind of businesses to attract, how to design the new school and community center." Jamal stood up, his arms crossed. "And what do you get out of it?" "Nobody spends $52 million out of the goodness of their heart." It was the question Marcus had been waiting for, the one that cut to the heart of everything. "What do I get?" "I get to keep a promise to my mother. I get to prove that success doesn't have to mean abandoning your community. And I get to come home." But even as he said it, Marcus could see the skepticism in some faces. This was too good to be true, too different from every other development story they'd heard, and he understood their doubt. He had one more card to play, one more truth to share that would either convince them or destroy any chance of trust. "There's something else you need to know," he said, his voice quieter now. "Something I've never told anyone, not even Tommy." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small, worn notebook. "My mother kept a journal during her illness. I found it after she died, but I couldn't bring myself to read it until last year. In it, she wrote about every neighbor who helped us, every person who brought food when she was too sick to cook, every time someone gave me a ride to school or helped with homework when she couldn't." Marcus opened the notebook to a page marked with a yellow sticky note. She wrote, "This community saved my son when I couldn't. They fed him when I had no money. They loved him when I was too sick to show love properly. If he ever gets the chance to pay that debt, I pray he remembers that home isn't just where you come from. It's where you choose to invest your heart." The silence in the room was profound. Mrs. Williams had tears in her eyes. Even Jamal had uncrossed his arms, his defensive posture softening. The truth is," Marcus continued, "I didn't stay away because I forgot about you. I stayed away because I was ashamed that I had resources and opportunities while you were struggling, ashamed that I was living in a mansion in Silicon Valley while Mrs. Chen was losing my mother's house, ashamed that I had become successful in a system that was designed to extract wealth from communities like this one." He closed the notebook and looked around the room. "I'm not here to be your savior. I'm here to be your partner, to use the resources I've accumulated to create something we design together, but only if you want me here, only if you trust me enough to try." What happened next surprised everyone, including Marcus. Mrs. Williams stood up slowly, her arthritis making the movement difficult, and began to clap. Slowly, others joined her. Not everyone. Jamal remained seated, his expression thoughtful but still guarded. A few others looked uncertain. But more than half the room was applauding, and Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in years. He felt like he was home. The next 3 hours were unlike any community meeting Eastwood Heights had ever seen. Instead of residents pleading with city officials for basic services, they were designing their own future. Marcus had brought laptops and tablets, and he showed them examples of successful community land trusts from around the country. They looked at plans for mixed-income housing that would allow long-time residents to stay while attracting new families. They discussed a community-owned grocery store that would provide fresh food and local jobs. But it was when they started talking about the school that the real magic happened. Sarah Chen, a recent college graduate and daughter of the Mrs. Chen who had rented Marcus's childhood home, raised her hand. "I have a degree in education, but I can't afford to live anywhere near the good school districts. What if we created our own school here? Not just a regular public school, but something innovative, a place where kids learn technology and entrepreneurship alongside traditional subjects. And what about a health clinic? Added Dr. James Wright, a retired physician who had been volunteering at free clinics across the city. I've been looking for a place to establish a community health center, somewhere that provides primary care, mental health services, and health education. Marcus watched as the conversation took on a life of its own. These weren't his ideas being imposed on the community. These were the community's own dreams, finally given space to breathe and grow. If you're seeing the power of what happens when people are given real agency over their own lives, drop a comment below about a time when someone believed in your potential even when you didn't believe in it yourself. By the end of the meeting, they had formed 5 working committees: housing and development, led by Mrs. Williams and Tommy; education and youth services, headed by Sarah Chen; health and wellness, coordinated by Dr. Wright; economic development and local business, managed by Maria Santos, who had revealed her dream of opening a catering business; and community safety and engagement, which Jamal had volunteered to chair after a long conversation with Marcus about restorative justice and community policing alternatives. As people filed out of the community center, chatting excitedly about plans and possibilities, Marcus found himself alone with Mrs. Williams. "But your mother would be proud," she said, placing a weathered hand on his arm. "I hope so. I really hope so. She always knew you'd come back. Even when you were 18 and scared and running toward that scholarship like your life depended on it, she knew you'd come back." "How could she know that? I didn't even know that." Mrs. Williams smiled. "Because she knew what kind of man she raised, and she knew that success without purpose is just another kind of poverty." Over the following months, Eastwood Heights transformed in ways that surprised even Marcus. The housing transfers were completed with the help of a team of lawyers who worked pro bono, inspired by the project's vision. Families who had been renters for generations suddenly found themselves homeowners with equity and stability they had never imagined possible. The community school opened in the renovated elementary school building, with Sarah Chen as principal and a teaching staff that included both certified educators and community members with specialized skills. Mr. Peterson, now in his 80s, taught a workshop on bicycle mechanics that became one of the most popular classes. Mrs. Williams led an oral history project where students interviewed long-time residents and created a digital archive of the neighborhood stories. The health clinic, housed in the former corner store, became a model for community-based healthcare. Dr. Wright partnered with a nearby medical school to create a residency program focused on community medicine. Young doctors lived in the neighborhood while completing their training, providing continuity of care and building relationships with families. But perhaps the most unexpected development was the economic transformation. Maria Santos's catering business grew so quickly that she had to hire 6 neighbors to help with orders. A community-owned coffee shop opened in the old factory building, serving as a co-working space for residents starting their own businesses. A small grocery store, owned and operated by the community trust, provided fresh food and became a gathering place for neighbors. The changes weren't without challenges. Some long-time residents struggled with the transition from renting to owning, needing support to understand property taxes and maintenance responsibilities. A few families chose to sell their newly acquired properties and move elsewhere, which sparked difficult conversations about gentrification and community identity. And there were ongoing tensions with the city government, which was initially suspicious of the community trust model and resistant to providing the infrastructure improvements the neighborhood needed. But Marcus had learned something important during his years in Silicon Valley about the difference between scaling technology and scaling community change. Technology could be replicated and deployed rapidly across markets. Community change required patience, relationship building, and the willingness to adapt plans based on what residents actually needed rather than what outsiders thought they needed. The real test came during the second year, when a major tech company offered to buy several properties in Eastwood Heights for 3 times their assessed value. The company wanted to build a satellite office and recruit from the community school's technology programs. It was exactly the kind of economic development opportunity that most communities would embrace without question. But the community trust had given residents a voice in such decisions, and the debate was intense. Some families saw the offer as a chance to cash out and move to larger homes in other neighborhoods. Others worried that accepting the offer would start a process of displacement that would eventually price out long-time residents. The community meetings stretched over several weeks, with passionate arguments on both sides. Marcus found himself in the difficult position of having resources that could influence the outcome, but knowing that his role was to facilitate the community's decision, not to make it for them. It was Jamal who proposed the solution that ultimately carried the day. "Margie, what if we negotiate with the company to become a partner instead of a buyer? They can lease space from the community trust, hire locally, and provide technology training for our kids. But we keep ownership and control." The negotiation took months, but the final agreement became a model for ethical corporate community engagement. The tech company established a satellite office in the renovated factory building, paying above-market lease rates to the community trust. They committed to hiring at least 60% of their staff from within a 5-mile radius and providing internships and apprenticeships for students from the community school. More importantly, the company agreed to share a percentage of their profits from the satellite office with the community trust, creating a sustainable funding source for ongoing neighborhood improvements. It was a partnership that benefited everyone while keeping community control intact. 3 years after that first community meeting, Marcus stood on the same corner where he had arrived that foggy morning, but everything had changed. Children played in a new pocket park where a vacant lot had been. The sounds were different too. Instead of sirens and arguments, he heard laughter from the playground, the hum of conversation from the coffee shop, and music from the community center where Sarah Chen was teaching a dance class for seniors. Tommy approached from across the street, no longer limping. The community health clinic had connected him with a specialist who had corrected the old injury that had been bothering him for years. "You know what's funny?" Tommy said, joining Marcus on the corner. "What's that? When you first told me you bought the whole neighborhood, I thought you had lost your mind. $52 million to give away houses and start a bunch of programs that might not work. And now I think you might be the sanest person I know. Look around, man. Look what we built." Marcus did look around, and what he saw was something he had never quite imagined when he started this project. He had thought he was coming home to fix a broken neighborhood. Instead, he had discovered that the neighborhood wasn't broken. It had been systematically disinvested and neglected, but the community itself, the relationships and resilience and creativity of the people who lived here, had never been broken. What he had provided wasn't salvation, it was resources and respect. The community had done the rest. That evening, Marcus walked to his mother's old house, which had been renovated and was now home to a young family with 2 small children. The father, David, was a teacher at the community school. The mother, Lisa, ran a small business making and selling jewelry from a workshop in their basement. Their children played in the same yard where Marcus had played 30 years earlier, but they were growing up in a world of possibilities that he could never have imagined. As he stood there, Marcus pulled out his phone and called his assistant in Silicon Valley. "Jennifer, I need you to start looking for someone to take over day-to-day operations of the company. I'm going to be spending a lot more time in Eastwood Heights." "Are you sure about this, Marcus? The company is at a critical growth phase." "I'm sure. I built the company to create financial independence so I could do work that mattered. This is that work." After hanging up, Marcus sat on the front steps of his childhood home with the permission of David and Lisa, who had invited him to visit whenever he wanted. He opened his mother's journal to the last entry she had written. just days before she died. I don't know if Marcus will ever read this, but if he does, I want him to know that I'm not worried about him. He has everything he needs to build a good life. My only prayer is that he remembers that a good life isn't just about what you achieve for yourself. It's about what you make possible for others. Marcus closed the journal and looked up at the evening sky, where the first stars were becoming visible despite the city lights. He thought about the children in the neighborhood who were growing up with access to technology, education, healthcare, and stable housing. He thought about the families who now had equity and ownership instead of just monthly rent payments. He thought about the small businesses starting up and the community members who were discovering talents and passions they had never had the opportunity to explore. But mostly, he thought about his mother's words and realized that he had finally understood what she meant. Success wasn't about accumulating wealth or achieving recognition. Success was about using whatever resources and opportunities you had to expand possibilities for others. The Eastwood Heights Community Trust had become more than a neighborhood development project. It had become a proof of concept for a different kind of economy, one based on community ownership and democratic decision-making rather than extraction and displacement. Other communities were reaching out, asking for guidance on replicating the model. Marcus had started a foundation to support similar projects, but he was careful to emphasize that each community would need to develop its own approach based on its own needs and assets. As he walked home to his apartment above the coffee shop, Marcus reflected on the journey that had brought him back to Eastwood Heights. He had left as a teenager, with nothing but potential and determination. He had returned as a millionaire with resources and connections, but the most important thing he had brought back wasn't money or business expertise. It was the willingness to listen, to learn, and to trust that the community itself held the wisdom needed for its own transformation. The fog was rolling in again, but this time it felt different, not like a shroud over forgotten dreams, but like a gentle blanket settling over a neighborhood that was finally, truly home. If this story has shown you a different way to think about success, community, and what it means to come home, please hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear that change is possible when we work together. Subscribe if you want to see more stories about people who are using their resources and talents to build the world we all deserve to live in.